Hey everybody, today I'm going to do a short video that talks about the ISTJ. I know I've talked about the ISTJ in the past, but recently I've seen some typologists out there that have been taking people who are clearly SI DOMs and telling them that they're NTPs or NFPs. And I think that's sort of a misconstruing of SI, or just missing what SI is about, and then seeing NE in the inferior slot, and because NE is visible, it's then boosted up higher than it actually is. Which is all fair. I mean, if somebody would like to be an NFP or NTP, far from me to say they shouldn't have that label if they wish it. But anyway, what I came across then was a beautiful piece, it's very poetic, by a Redditor named rosegoldfawn. I'll try to remember to put the text of the post in the description. That is, this has been credited to rosegoldfawn. I never was able to find the original, but it is, I guess, years old, and I will abridge the description here somewhat, just for the sake of this video. But it is a beautiful way of thinking about the ISTJ. That's not the NPC, the robot, the corporate drone and all that nonsense. It comes much closer to, I think, what is the actual nature of an ISTJ. And then I'll loop it back to the INFP and a little compare and contrast. So rosegoldfawn described SI DOMs as having a mythic view of the world, which is correct. I mean, SE is seeing the world as it is. It's a pair of glasses, it's this. And you can do stuff, you can manipulate it, you can do stuff with it. But SI is a layer of, a symbolic layer that's removed from the actual thing already. And that is, for instance, this is brown. There are lenses. The lenses distort light. It's plastic. There's a bridge here, it's round. There are angles, it's headgear, it corrects the eyesight, and so forth. So SI assigns all of these different meanings to the thing if it's not specifically, and it's not specifically the thing itself. So that's how SI then kind of loops in with experience. NE is something different again. And I've tried to record this before, and I started going down the NE rabbit hole. It's a bad idea. We'll go back to rosegoldfawn and what that Redditor had to say about the ISTJ, because that's the beautiful poetic thing. That is, so SI DOMs have this mythic view of the world. It's not the direct sensing, but their interpretation of it. And in that same way, when you look at an SI DOM, you see kind of the shallows of what they're exposing. You don't see the depths of their SI because it is internally focused. So what is the ISTJ about? Well, the rosegoldfawn describes them as the archetype of the knight. And yes, other MBTI types are called the knight. Let's not go there. For the sake of this metaphor, let's use the ISTJ as the knight, and it'll be it'll make sense in the way the in the way the cognitive stack is described. So the ISTJ is in search of his or her heart. That is the third slot or tertiary FI child. So the stereotype about the ISTJ is to be one who fulfills duty. Well, why do they have this SI experience and TE, or extroverted thinking process, and kind of the systematic and experiential ways of dealing with the world? It's to fulfill a moral obligation, and that is the thing that powers the ISTJ. Below the waterline, but the importance. And that is why I've said before, maybe not here, but I know I've said before plenty of times, if you want to find someone with the heart of gold, find someone who's an ISTJ or an INTJ, because that third slot FI is it's gold to the people that it cares about. they're warmer than INFPs in that regard, and I say that with conviction. So the SI Dom, as the archetype of the knight, imagine that they're the knight in the court. They've grown up in the court. They were squired there. They learned all of the things that they know on their way to a knight. They jousted, used the lance and sword, learned literature and poetry, and became part of the courtly scene, if you will. And that court is the important thing in the knight's heart that needs to be protected. It's that society is dependent on the knight's virtue and duty, and the knight fulfilling that duty and virtue to manage the household and help maintain the court. So the court doesn't have to be traditional conservative 1950s America. The court is the environment in which the knight got her or his experience. So an ISTJ can have blue hair and a septum piercing and tattoos all over. Those things don't make a person's personality. It just means that they grew up with a certain set of experiences and values, and that was the court in which with which they are familiar, and that they are looking to protect if they value that court. So back to the ISTJ knight and away from the tattoos. So they squired, they learned the things they did, they have the discipline to have trained for battle, they are able to manage the household and maintain the court because that is their world. It's their inner world. And so with that SI dominant comes the NE inferior. The NE inferior brings forth the potential threats to the knight and their court. So it's the danger of plague or famine or war coming to the doorstep, or a dragon or other mythical beast that threatens the household. And the knight has learned through experience how to face off against these threats. But it's important not just for them to do so, but because of FI, to do so nobly and admirably, so that they become a role model to others in the way that they're able to protect and maintain and foster the court even through the worst of its potential travails. So that's where with NE, the knight can become very, let's say, vigilant. We might see it as paranoid from the outside, but vigilant for these sorts of dangers, because the court is everything. It must be protected. And so there you have kind of the ISTJ in a nutshell. Now contrast that with the INFP, who I would describe as the monk. They're both part of the same court, but the monk is an ascetic. They haven't grown up training with the lance and the sword. They have had experience, but their experiences have been internal and more spiritual. They've been about understanding and fostering others and trying to heal, and just maintaining the metaphysical needs of the court. Therefore, they may not have had this time with the poetry, and they don't have, they haven't had the enjoyment of or the joys of the courtly intrigue. Those things are not the things that they value. And at the same time, one can see where an ISTJ, like my dad, would get very frustrated because when there's a threat like war coming to the doorstep, it's like, pick up your sword and fight. But that's not the monk's role. The monk doesn't know these things. It's like, know how to pray and maybe bake bread and make jam. And to turn inward to understand the spiritual needs. Yet it is important to have the monk in the court as well, because when the knight is laid to rest, who is going to be the one to observe these rituals, the rituals of bonding, of parting? And for those reasons, you can kind of see, I hope, and through this odd analogy, how ISTJ and INFP are in a way similar. They see each other, they can almost see eye to eye, but they're serving different masters in different ways. And that becomes the way that these two types, which in some ways look so similar, end up being pointed in very different directions. And so the SI-DOM, yes, they're a sensor, but they don't live in the real world as an SE user would. They're a sensor that lives in their own interpretation of the world. And it's just that then any tool user lives in a more abstract representation where, this thing is not just brown and plastic and lenses. It's wheels and stock market crash and grabbing the brass ring and paramecium. These things don't make any sense because they're linked in my head to particular things that I would see from these qualities. But give it a moment and I'll be off to the races and talking about libraries and health scares and just things that are part of the hop-off points. And so I wanted to conclude with a final thought, because this goes back to the folks who are SI-DOMs being mistaken for intuitives, which again, fine by me. But I do remember hearing one person who kind of self-described their intuitive experience by saying, when I get into a very quiet place and I concentrate, I can tap into my intuition, and I've learned to listen to it, and now I can do certain things with my intuition, and I really feel like I'm empowered by it. That is not my intuitive experience at all. My intuitive experience is it's a babbling idiot. It's intrusive. It's almost at times like I'm fighting the stupid, that if I am trying to concentrate on a thing, the next thing I know, I'm off to the races and watching or thinking about grass growing or the shape of geese in formation migrating south, or hummingbird feeders, and gosh knows what else. It just is a constant, any is a constant and intrusive pain in the butt. Yes, it is useful to a degree that you kind of drag it in by its ear and say, okay, do something useful now. Think in this direction instead of just randomly giving me a bunch of garbage to deal with like you always do. But the idea of SI and NE is that they're both abstract, and they are, yes, tied to one another. But SI is sort of all of that wonderful symbolic stuff that's tied directly to an object. So yes, it is an abstraction, but NE is that subconscious layer that kind of connects all things in divergent ways that are mostly a useless waste of time, although it can be very amusing at times. So anyway, I'll stop there. I hope this has been a little bit useful. If my babbling's gone too far off the rails, read rosegoldfawn's piece that she wrote about the ISTJ night that I'll put in the description. I think it is poetic and beautiful, and it gives much better justice to the strength and the spirit of the ISTJ that I think is often overlooked. Speaking of often overlooked, I apologize for folks who've come to me in the past and said, well, what about ISFJs? I don't know ISFJs as well. I mean, I know them, but I don't understand them as well because the functions aren't as close. So they're lovely people, and I sort of know what they are by observing them, but I don't know how they tick in the way that I can imagine how Delta Quadra That is ENFP, INFP, ESTJ, ISTJ tick. Anyway, enough for me. I hope you're having a good day wherever you may be. And, well, we'll check in again soon. Bye for now.